Hello, everyone. My name is Zoha Waseem. I'm a co-coordinator for the Urban Violence Research Network and a research fellow at the Institute for Global City Policing at UCL. And this is Street Talk, an initiative of the Urban Violence Research Network. In Street Talk, we chat with experts, researchers, academics, and scholars about their research projects, their fieldwork experiences, publications, current affairs, and more. Today, we have with us a very special guest, and we will be focusing on Nigeria. Earlier this month, nationwide protests broke out in Nigeria, and protesters have been calling for an end to police violence and police brutality, demanding police reforms. In response, security forces have opened fire on protesters, leaving at least 10 people killed. Today, we have with us Mr. Oluwole Ojewale. Oluwole is a policy researcher and a development worker with a vast amount of experience researching on urban governance, security, community resilience, and democratization in Nigeria. Some of the research projects that he is focusing on look at community policing, accountable governance for justice and security, pandemic policing and human rights, and preventing and countering violent extremism. He is also the co-author with Adegbola Ojo of the book Urbanisation and Crime in Nigeria, published by Palgrave Macmillan, the first comprehensive book to explore the intersection between urbanization and crime in Nigeria. He is currently working with CLEEN Foundation, a civil society organization that prioritizes evidence-driven advocacy. He has also recently submitted his PhD, and his doctoral research examines the socio-cultural and economic characteristics of residents affected by violent conflict in north-central Nigeria and the factors influencing community resilience in Nigeria. So that's quite a profile, Oluwole, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today and to welcome you on behalf of the Urban Violence Research Network. Thank you so much for taking out the time. I know that our viewers and members will be really interested in hearing about what is happening in Nigeria. But before we get to that, it would be lovely to hear a bit more about your work and your research. So perhaps if we can begin with that, and if you can tell us what you have been researching on.
Thank you so much for having me once again. And I've done a couple of work in Nigeria, but the one that I consider as a landmark research is the work on urbanization and crime in Nigeria, which is an offshoot of a mega national project carried out by DFID in Nigeria that looks at urban governance as a gamut of issues on infrastructure, on transportation, on markets, on economy, and then I work on the crime components that's tried to create a nexus between urban expansion in Nigeria, urbanization in Nigeria, and how it is shaping or aiding or abetting crime in Nigeria. And then I did that work with a scholar in UK, Lincoln University in London, and I serve as a co-investigator on the research. So eventually, after we submitted the report to DFID, because of our academic inclination, we seized the moment to also use that opportunity to make significant contribution to knowledge, particularly in the area of crime and urbanization in Nigeria. And I think that is a book that you referenced. So I just concluded a research that tries to study community resilience to violent conflict in urban and rural areas of north central Nigeria. If you have studied development historically and even contemporary experiences, what we have seen in recent time is that what is rocking the northern part of Nigeria is also cascading into the north central part of the country in terms of a violent conflict between herdsmen and local farmers, and then a bit of ethno-religious crisis that has characterized cities like Jos. I'm very sure probably must have heard about Jos, like Plateau before, Makurdi in Benue State. So I did a comparative analysis of what community resilience look like in rural and urban area, and what are the factors that are shaping community resilience to violent conflict in those places, and looking at what is happening in the city and what is happening in the rural area. And I did a bit of trend analysis of the 20 years analysis of frequency, intensity of violent attack in this area that I've selected for my study in the North Central. I did an extensive data mining with the data repository of Armed Conflict Event Location Database, ACLED. I'm very sure you know about ACLED in Sweden. So I did an extensive analysis of the data to generate evidence about what violent attack, violent conflict, incident of violent conflict have looked like within the last 20 years. At some point, there was a peak in the rural area. At some point, it peaked in the urban area. And at some point, it's almost the same in terms of evolution of violent conflict, both in rural area, because attacks were going on in the city, attacks were also going on in the rural area simultaneously. So the peak in terms of my research finding, in terms of that trend analysis, is that violent conflict actually peaked in the year 2018 in both the rural and urban area, and that is when we had massive attack carried out by criminal elements who have take advantage of the porosity of Nigeria border to come from Niger Republic, to come from Mali, to come from Burkina Faso, coming into Nigeria to perpetrate some of these crime. So I also established that what we're witnessing in the North Central actually is a transnational organized crime, which has a link with what is happening in other countries that we are surrounded with in Nigeria. And that is largely influenced by free flow of firearms, which according to available United Nations report shows that about 70% of arm trafficking that is taking place in West Africa find their destination into Nigeria. And I think that explains the explosive nature of the violent conflict that is going on in Nigeria now, which has eaten deep into 3 out of the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria. The Northwest, you have the rural banditry. In the Northeast, you have insurgency. And in the North Central, a mix or a combination of both. So that is the focus of my PhD thesis, which I consider as my most recent research experience. And then in terms of my ongoing research, I'm also looking at this current experience that is going on in Nigeria now, which has to do with the EndSARS movement. And I'm doing a research work that tries to look at youth uprising and the quest for police reform.
Great. Just coming on to the next question then. So as you mentioned, you have been looking at sort of youth uprising and police reforms in Nigeria. And I think that both those issues are kind of very central to the ongoing protests in Nigeria. And I think our viewers would really be interested in knowing what is happening and sort of how did we get here? What's the context? What's the background? And given your sort of experience and expertise in working on the ground on these issues, I think if you can sort of explain to us what is happening, that would be really useful.
Okay, thank you so much. What is happening in Nigeria now is an aggregate experience of grievances that the youth have bottled up for the past couple of years now, probably the last 5 years or more. There is a unit. Okay, there used to be a unit within the Nigerian police force called SARS, which is tagged as Special Anti-Robbery Squad Unit of the Nigerian Police Force, which basically has its mandate to tackle armed robbery in the society. But along the line, found a new mandate for themselves, which seeks to take advantage of the state's power that is that they are authorized to use as police officers enforcing law and orders in the country, and then towards that to use it as an instrument of coercion, harassment, and intimidation, particularly against the upwardly mobile youth in the community. Just anything can warrant a youth to be arrested by SARS by the type of jeans trousers that you wear, by virtue of a laptop backpack that you carry, by virtue of the quality of the car that you are driving. Anything can just warrant anybody to be harassed and arrested by SARS. And it is really for pecuniary gains, not necessarily that they are fighting crime in the society. So you have young men and women who have lost their lives in the last 5 years or more as a result of SARS extortion, SARS intimidation, and then killings and wanton destruction of people's life, particularly the young men in the hand of the SARS. So it's a form of police brutality that a lot of youth have had to cope with, and it is happening predominantly in the cities. upwardly mobile cities in the south, like Port Harcourt. Lagos has been the epicenter, Warri, Benin City, Ibadan, Owerri, Enugu, where you have upwardly mobile youths who are probably engaging in their regular day-to-day job. So they've been at the receiving end of the SARS brutality and extortion. And then, you know, we're living in contemporary time where technology, social media has taken over the whole place. And then it's easier for something that happens in a location to be easily escalated to what is, to other locations that people can also rally around to promote a cause. So EndSARS has actually been since 2017. And then it's tied to the issues of police brutality, like I said. And then you have a situation whereby there has been pocket of an online protest and offline protest where youth have come on the streets, and you have the government promising that they are going to, reform SARS. You also have commitment from the president at some point that they are going to reform SARS. So you see youth coming offline and offline 6 months, 5 months, 1 year after the status quo remains. So I think what we have witnessed in the last 2 weeks shows that the youth have actually come to the boiling point. The threshold have been stretched to the elastic limits, and they feel this is the time that government must be seen to doing something. I work in CLEEN Foundation, an organization that has been working in the area of public safety and security, and we have done extensive work with the police institution in Nigeria. What I found out and what is established from our experience is that generally police reform in Nigeria, it has to look into the entire architecture of policing in Nigeria. But the youth are singling out the SARS unit because they have been at the receiving end of their professional misconduct over time. So what we have seen and what is played out is the fact that police reform as a whole, or in piecemeal, in this case, with respect to the case of EndSARS, has been a matter that I would describe as motions without movement. So you have a situation whereby government will promise change, that they are going to reform the police. Reports have been submitted, studies have been carried out, but government is doing nothing about the whole thing. The reports are just being submitted and gathering dust on the shelf. So it has given birth to an occasion whereby the youth do no longer trust in any promise that is coming from government. And that is what you see playing out now. You will have followed the debates, you follow the protests. Government is saying, come, let us dialogue. Come, we are going to do this. We have ended SARS. But to our amazement, government ended SARS as they promised to do. And in less than 24 hours, the police came up with another unit that they now call SWATs. So because of the mistrust over time, we are taught even if the police is going to do that, it's going to be an evolution of a stakeholders engagement, where the terms of reference and mandate will be clear about what SWAT is going to be doing, and then the mandate is going to also prohibit them from going into other areas that are outside their mandate. What SARS became as a monster, to speak to the youth, is that SARS veered away from prosecuting cases that has to do with armed robbery. I started checking the phones and laptops of anybody that is going on the street, and every youth suddenly becomes a criminal in the hand of SARS. There have been people who have been wasted, people who have been killed in SARS custody, and who have become missing persons for the past 5 years. So that is the experience that we're having, and the youth have taken to the streets that enough is enough. We can no longer take this. And that is what you have seen in the recent time, that youth have been protesting for the past 2 weeks, and suddenly the government doesn't know how to handle the protest, because government has a traditional mindset of responding to issues like this. If it were to be a matter of labor union, they look for people to invite and probably engage, and then probably, reach some compromise here and there. But the level of the mistrust that the youth, the entire population has in the system, will not allow that to play out this time around. So you have a dichotomy of experience. You have youth who are upwardly mobile, who are probably in their late 20s, who didn't have experience of the military dictatorship, who will not be cowed by any force or any forces that the government is trying to deploy on the streets, who are even ready to face the gun, as some people have lost their life even in the process. So they've taken to the streets, and they are leveraging the power of technology to do everything that they've been doing across clusters, across the cities. And then you have government that wants to be responding to the yearnings of the youth through the regular parochial mindset of a, in fact, let me summarize. You have government that is responding through the analog mechanism, methodology, to the youth who are digitally savvy and have now gone to the point that they have rallied around and gotten global support for Nigerian youth, African youth, and even youth across the cities in the world, in Chicago, in London, in Toronto, in Italy, everywhere. They are protesting in South Africa. So EndSARS has now become a global movement that the government doesn't have a solution to. The only thing now is to ensure that government is seen to be accountable in the process. And I don't think the youth have the luxury of time to wait till government provide a solution to this issue. What the youth are doing in the court, they are not only asking for something that is going to guarantee their own safety and security and well-being. What they are saying is that since police is the face of state authority in any city or any community, they want a police that respects human rights. They want a police that respects the rule of law. They want a police that is reformed, a police that is citizen-centric in their approach to 21st century policing. That is what the youth are asking for, responding through analog means.
Yeah,
the youth that is savvy.
That's a tall order, and I think you sort of summarized it really well. And just how complicated it is, because it's almost as if they're asking for the architecture of policing to be changed, and it's very much similar to the demands that we see in other countries by civil societies and protesters in other countries for policing to change, the function and the structure of policing to change, right? And I think that's also what essentially the foundation of the ongoing protests in Nigeria as well. So it's more than just SARS, right? Because you said SARS has been replaced, they disbanded SARS, but now they've replaced it with another sort of similar unit, SWAT. So it's not just about a particular unit anymore. It's very much about the kind of the philosophy and the foundation of the policing organization, right? It's a tall order for the state then, right? Because I think as you sort of implied, like there's a lack of political will as well. And they probably inquire into it and they investigate and they write reports, but there's very little that's actually being done. Any kind of very little sort of tangible change that we're seeing. So where do you see it going? Do you see that there's enough pressure being exerted by the youth on the state? Will they actually be able to do more than disband SARS? Where do you see it going? What do you see it resulting out of these protests?
Well, I think there are different scenarios that I can create out of this. And the number one thing is that, one, for the first time in over a decade, we have seen a protest that is shaking government and police to the roots, to the foundation of architecture of governance, architecture of politics, and even architecture of policing in Nigeria. Now, architecture of governance in the sense that the presidency now know that they need to respond urgently to the yearnings of the youth. That is at the level of architecture of governance. And then the police as an institution, at the level of architecture of policing, now realize that it's no longer going to be business as usual. At least at this time, you must just be seen to embrace reform. It is very, very important. And then at the base, at the level of the architectural politics, is that this signals a serious potential for democratic change. I take you back, if you go into the database of voters database in Nigeria, the Nigerian youth occupies a considerable percentage of the voters base in Nigeria. And then the Nigerian youth we are also living in a country where over 60% of the entire population are below the age of 35. What that tells you is that these people, if they are able to self-organize, can actually determine what the political outcome of 2023 is going to look like. So I see a potential for democratic change. Then I also see a potential for awareness, political consciousness among the youth. Why am I saying that? It's important to note that street protest has an expiry date. Anger can never serve as a strategy. It must serve as a means to an end. Now people have gone on the streets in Lagos, in Port Harcourt, in Abuja, and then for the first time, you see the youth gathering across the cities, irrespective of their religious affiliation, irrespective of their ethnic affiliation, pursuing a common goal, which is driving reform and then making a case, because the demands of EndSARS movement has now expanded beyond police reform. So I also see a potential to cause other shifts or changes in other areas of governance in Nigeria, be it education, be it health. We just came out of pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, and for the first time we saw how weak our public health system is. So I think this EndSARS movement that started with the police reform agenda has a potential to drive inclusive agenda across board, whether in health, in education, in agriculture, in IT, in business, in economy. So we are getting to the point now that this has awoken the sleeping giants in the Nigerian youth, and then is able to also heighten political consciousness among the youth. And then that might likely influence 2023 political outcome in Nigeria, because they have the number, they have the figure, and they can cause a tsunami in terms of a political earthquake. And then the second outcome that I think can come out of this has to do with the possibility of this movement being hijacked by people who have other ulterior motive. You know, I don't know whether you have followed the secessionist agitation of the Biafrans in Nigeria. There's a movement that is coming for secession of Biafra, the southeastern part of the country, which is popularly populated by the Igbos in Nigeria. So they have also hit the streets and key into this agitation, and trying to use that as a means to also drive their self-determination agitation in Nigeria. There's that subtle possibility by this EndSARS movement to create what I call unintended consequence. It's very, very important. Setting out for the EndSARS movement, where nobody envisaged that some of these other issues can come up. But this one that I talked about, I call it unintended consequences of the EndSARS movement. I also see the government responding beyond the EndSARS call, EndSARS demand, which originally has to do with police reform. The president just granted a speech yesterday, and he talked about other programs that the government will be doing to engender youth inclusion, youth development in the country, which I think is largely going to be addressing the issues of youth and unemployment or underemployment in Nigeria, which also serve as a precursor for the grievance that you have seen the youth expressing on the streets of our cities in the past few days.
That's really interesting. That's quite a you know, a whole range of scenarios that can sort of transpire out of these protests, and I think you've explained them very well. I'm just going to shift gears a little bit, because I think, you know, nowadays you can't really have a conversation without bringing in COVID-19. And I know a lot of our viewers and our members are going to be really interested in knowing how the police has, for example, responded to the pandemic in Nigeria, and also how crime patterns perhaps have been affected by the pandemic in Nigeria. So I know that's something that you have researched on as well. So if you can very briefly sort of touch upon how the Nigerian experience has been with the pandemic, particularly with regards to crime and policing in Nigeria.
The COVID-19 pandemic has not really influenced policing much in Nigeria, in the sense that the policing outfit, the Nigerian police force, has never witnessed this dimension of destruction before, which was a global destruction in terms of disaster preparedness, capability to respond to issues like COVID-19 in Nigeria. And why am I saying that? You find out that particularly in the global south, in African countries, to be able to curtail or prevent COVID-19 from spreading the way it spreads in Europe and other parts of the world, you need the police to act as the first responder. Because one of the things that we saw is that government, state, federal, local government started making and started responding and giving executive order, banning and restricting movement of people. And then you need the police to enforce the lockdown directive of the government. But you have a police that was never prepared for that. So they were caught unaware. And then what that portends is that the inability of the police to effectively enforce the lockdown directive implies that people will continue to flout the directive and move around. And then it increases the likelihood of the COVID-19 spreading like a wildfire in any community, including Nigeria. So what has played out is that you now have a police that needed to be trained on the spot when COVID-19 had already penetrated into the cities, and then trying to see how they can limit or restrict movement from one place to the other. So it worked originally in the first few days, and suddenly the police, I mean, looking at the culture of corruption that has permeated the entire system, saw an opportunity to also leverage what the whole COVID-19 for pecuniary gains. So in other words, people were restricted from moving from one city to another city. But if you can pay the police on the road who have mounted roadblock, people started, I mean, corruption crept in, and then people were moving from one place to the other, transiting from one city to another, and then police suddenly created an economy around the movement of the people, and then charging them huge amount of money. And then because of perception in Nigeria that COVID-19 is a disease of the Western world, most people are skeptical about COVID-19. People were still ready to move from one place to the other as long as they can pay the police. And there are evidence, there are available reports on the internet, investigative journalism, investigative reporting rather, that have documented some of these experiences. So you saw the police, we saw the police carrying over the regular style, we saw the police carrying out pandemic policing with the regular mindset that they have used pre-pandemic, with the regular tool and with the regular engagement that we are seeing before the pandemic. So I don't really think the pandemic has so much of influence on the police as an institution. But what we have seen actually is that there are genuine commitment on the part of some international development partners, organizations like Me Foundation that I work with, to support the Nigerian police on training and that can enhance their preparedness for pandemic. We do hope that we have come out of this, but in case there's going to be a second wave or another pandemic is going to come, where there is now a readiness to incorporate that into the training of the Nigerian police, I do hope there will be the political will to make sure that that is followed through to the end. But the pandemic didn't really change so much of policing in Nigeria as we have seen across the cities.
Yeah, that's
by extension, I don't know whether you have asked the question about what the pandemic has to do with crime.
Yes, I'd like to know that very much. That would be really interesting to know if crime was affected by the pandemic as well. Did you see any sort of trends in a decrease in certain types of crime and an increase in other types of crimes?
Well, I think in the overall crime rates did not really change significantly in Nigeria. However, certain crime times change, and then one of such is domestic violence or assaults. you now have a situation whereby people who are working, couples who are working, who probably have domestic issues. Someone leaves in the morning, another one leaves in the morning. They come back late in the night, looking at urban challenges of trafficking and all those things. There is no room to engage in regular, maybe spousal arguments that could lead to gender-based violence. But you now have people locked down together in the house and spending more than spending the whole of 24 hours together. So I think one of the things that we are seeing is a spike in domestic violence and assault, which I think there's a global explanation for that. It's not peculiar to Nigeria. And then we also saw another spike in terms of crime that we've seen during the pandemic lockdown is a commercial break-in, where criminals took advantage of the inadequate number of law enforcement resources to perpetrate property crime in the commercial corridors, like in Lagos in particular. We witnessed that. And then I also guess that the criminals stayed away from housing and residential areas during the lockdown because everyone is at home. So we didn't really see so much of a burglary crime within the residential area. The crime that we witnessed during the pandemic are crimes that were taking place in commercial nerves of the cities. And then the domestic assault of violence could be because of psychological stress and frustration, aggression that come with COVID-19, like I said earlier. And this has been justified by frustration, aggression, school of thought in terms of some of the things that we have read about crime. And then regarding policing, that, policing is supposed to respond to crime. The truth is that COVID-19, like I said, are significantly affected the internal and external operation of Nigerian police. For instance, to their facilities, and they also reduce caution and relationship while in the public. So I think, although it came as something that the police had to be responded to in the midst of the calamity of COVID-19. The COVID-19 ordinarily offered the Nigerian police the opportunity to leverage on technology in policing, but I've not seen that being put in place properly. I think it's one of the lessons that we need to learn. Policing globally has moved in the direction of intelligence gathering and is technologically aided. But the Nigerian police, pre, during, and even post-COVID-19 has not really embraced technology in terms of policing. It is the usual human-to-human interaction. So I think one of the opportunities that the COVID-19 availed the Nigerian police, if it were to be a learning organization, is to embrace technology in policing. It's going to aid intelligence gathering. And furthermore, I observed that community policing or engagement during the pandemic was suspended, probably because of health risk implication, because it has to do with a regular interface with the community, and at the same time, the policing a community with the community support, context, and knowledge. And then I think I'm confident to say that concerns regarding COVID-19 transmission from the public and the practical requirement of social distancing has also reduced efficiency and effectiveness of policing in Nigeria. And then after all, the Nigerian police force operational activities used before the pandemic were not restricted by social distancing. So you have, like I said earlier, it's important that the Nigerian police force learn some lessons from COVID-19 in terms of disaster risk preparedness for pandemic like this, and then also try to change the methodology of policing that has been deployed in Nigeria over time.
Yeah. I think that's been really fascinating. I think we've covered so much ground, and I think our viewers will have a pretty well-rounded picture and understanding of what's happening in Nigeria. And obviously some of that especially will resonate with what the police have been doing in other countries of the global south, and the sort of how you mentioned that certain practices continued, right? Like in terms of taking bribes and corruption and looking the other way. And I think we've seen that in a lot of other countries as well, that certain kind of policing practices did continue. And of course, some police departments, around the world, they lack that kind of technology, they lack that kind of preparedness, they lack that kind of training. So it's good to see that there is a discussion happening in different countries about how better to prepare your police forces and police departments to be better prepared for epidemics and pandemics and other public health emergencies. So I think that it's also a very interesting time because you've got a interesting time in Nigeria because you've got this widespread sort of protest happening that's demanding police reforms, and then you also have a pandemic that is also demanding police reforms. So I think it's a very interesting time in Nigerian history and in the history of policing in Nigeria. So thank you so much for sharing your research and your insights with us. And I think it's fascinating, and I think you're doing some really important work. And I'm sure our viewers and our members will really benefit from everything that you have read. And I look forward to reading more of your publications and seeing more of your interviews. I'm sure we'll be sharing more of what you write, and we'll be inviting you in the future as well. So thank you so much for taking out the time. And thank you to all our viewers and our members for watching. You can follow our about Street Talk and our blog on our website, urbanviolence.org. Thank you all.